Welcome, everyone. We're going to start our Gramercy Book Club discussion this evening featuring Damnation Spring, tonight's book selection by author Ash Davidson. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Kenyon Review for being Gramercy's community partner for this book club program. I'm Linda Cass. We're live streaming this program through Zoom meeting, and it will be recorded. To preview the next hour for you, after introductions, our moderator, Nicole Terez Dutton, will lead you in a discussion about Damnation Spring for about 25 minutes. We'll be joined by Ash Davidson for the following half hour. Nicole will ask Ash your questions as well as several of her own during that latter time. And let me review quickly some details about the Zoom meeting platform that many of you, I'm sure, are well acquainted with. First, on the upper right corner of your screen, you have those two viewing options, speaker view or gallery view. You're welcome to use either. Next, find the mute unmute icon, which appears as a microphone on your screen. It might be on the bottom or the top, depending on what device you're using. And right now, you're all muted. Once I introduce our facilitator and discussion begins, you will be able to unmute yourself when you have a comment, and then mute yourself when you're finished speaking. You will all be muted during the Q&A portion of the program. The chat box is another handy tool, and the icon sits on the bottom of laptops. I'm not sure where they are on the mobile devices. Clicking on this box opens a window on the right side of your screen and allows you to write comments. If you have a question that you'd like Nicole to ask Ash during the second half of the program, please insert that question in all capital letters. And you could do that at any time during the program. It'll allow Nicole to see your question differentiated from other things in the chat box. If you'd prefer also to comment on chat instead of on camera during the book discussion, you can also do so in chat. The chat text will also be recorded. If you haven't done so yet, click on chat right now and you'll see that column on the right side. We're providing registration links to our September author programs. They're all at 7 o'clock in the evening. On Monday, September 13th, Gramercy Book Club features We Are the Brennans. Tracy Lang's impressive debut novel explores the staying power of shame and the redemptive power of love in an Irish Catholic family torn apart by secrets. Jim Phelan, Ohio State University English professor and director of Project Narrative, will moderate the group discussion and interview with Tracy. This will be live streamed on Zoom meeting. On Wednesday, September 22nd, John Thorndike, author of The Last of His Mind, A Year in the Shadow of Alzheimer's, shares the bittersweet account of his final year with his father, Joe, the former managing editor of Life magazine. John's memoir is a portrait of deep family ties, caregiving, and love. This free event will be held in person at Gramercy Books with limited seating, and we ask if the Delta variant remains active in Franklin County that those attending be vaccinated. Masks are also encouraged. And on Tuesday, September 28th, we go back to a virtual event with National Jewish Book Award winner Ronald Balson, who shares his latest legal thriller, Defending Britta Stein, in conversation with OSU's David Steben, an expert in American political and legal history. This program will be live streamed on Zoom webinar. Click on the links for any of these programs to learn more about them or to register. And you can learn more about Gramercy Books author programs. More are listed on our website, as well as we communicate out with our e-newsletter. And you can sign up for the newsletter at our website, gramercybooksbexley.com. And now on to tonight's program. In tonight's book selection, Damnation Spring, debut author Ash Davidson tells an epic and immersive story of a Pacific Northwest logging town wrenched into by a mystery that threatens to derail its way of life. It takes place in the late 1970s. The depiction of ordinary people trapped by circumstances beyond their control makes for a heart-wrenching modern American tragedy. John McMurtry, in his cover page appraisal in the New York Times Book Review, called Damnation Spring a glorious book and an assured novel that's gorgeously told. And that's pretty big positive acclaim for this book. Tonight's selection is a timeless and universal book about human nature, about our relationships to our loved ones and our communities, about morality and greed, and it's about our understanding of and respect for the natural world. Ash Davidson was born in Arcata, the small California city that's near the novel's setting, and she brings the area to life with a deep understanding of all its details. She attended the Iowa Writers Workshop. Her work has been supported by the Arizona Commission on the Arts and McDowell. She lives in Flagstaff, Arizona. Moderating our discussion is renowned poet Nicole Terez Dutton. She's the 14th editor of the esteemed Kenyon Review, which has evolved from a distinguished literary magazine founded in 1939 to a preeminent arts organization. Nicole's work has appeared in many prestigious journals, and her collection of poetry, If One of Us Should Fall, was selected as the winner of the 2011 Cave Canem Poetry Prize. Nicole received her MFA from Brown University and has received fellowships from the Frost Place, the Fine Arts Work Center, Breadloaf Writers Conference, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Thank you for being us, and we're so happy that you're moderating this discussion, Nicole.
Thank you, Linda. It's so great to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Nikki, for making it all happen at Gramercy Books. And then I wanna just say hello to everyone here, and thank you. Can you just raise your hand if you're a long time kind of participant in these book discussions? Who's a regular? So okay, all right, excellent. So some new folks too, regulars. Thank you for welcoming me into your community. It's really nice to be here. And I have to say that I'm delighted by this book, and I'm so looking forward to talking with Ash about the piece. This is just such a sprawling, wonderful book with so many threads running through it. It's so rich. You know, this is one of those books that it's like the Thanksgiving dinner style book where you just like, there's the more you see and the more you eat. And it's just, it's such a treat and so rigorous. So I'm excited to be here and to think about this book with you all. And I'm curious who has read the book, who has had a chance to get into it. Okay, this is good to know too. So one of my teachers is Terrence Hayes. He's a poet. And then another person I'm working with, their deputy editor, Elliot Holt, always talk about the part of the book or the part of the piece that really catches and holds your attention and really kind of is resonant to you as being the heat, you know, the heat in the book. And I'm just curious, for those of you who have had a chance to look at the book, where the heat lies for you, like what is kind of calling to you and keeps, I think, stays alive in your mind after you've put the book down. Is there any heat for any of you all who have checked this book out a little bit?
Hello.
Hi, Beth.
Hi. I don't know if it's the heat, but I came away with this very powerful sense of people whose way of life is threatened and feeling empathy for them. I mean, you know, there are two sides in the story, and I know which side I fall on. I know, and but she gave such a clear understanding how you've got generations of a family, and that's how they support their families, and that's their way of life. And so I thought that was particularly relevant since so many people are facing that now as we speak. And I'm guilty. I haven't had the same empathy for those people, I think, you know, it's just, so it was really good for me to have that kind of deep understanding and come away with that.
Yeah, for me too. And I feel like the way that one of the things I really appreciate about this book is that you said there's two sides, but then I feel like there's many more sides. There's so much complication kind of in the way that all of these characters have been rendered and their positions relative to, you know, the facts of their circumstances, right? with it, where you have empathy, but the empathy, for me anyway, the empathy was broad. I didn't feel like there was just a right or a wrong per se. I felt like there were all these very deeply human perspectives that I could understand, even if I didn't agree with them, which is pretty impressive.
Very impressive.
The whole sense of community. For the rest of you who have had a chance to look at it, where is the heat for you?
There you go, Beth.
Nobody ever talks.
You did.
Well, that's why I talked.
Hey Beth, you're not muted.
Oh dear.
Jean, no worries. Jean, did I see your hand up as someone who checked out the book beforehand?
Oh, thank you. Yes. This might not be the heat of the book. There's so much that's memorable that keeps going through my mind. But a universal theme, maybe many universal themes, but the one that really struck me was a young boy on his first day as a logger, I guess, and getting hurt and blood all over. And what he said was, "I promised my mom." And that just stayed with me because that's generational. That mother knew what might happen to him and most likely would happen to him somewhere along the line. But here's his first day, and I promised my mom that I wouldn't get hurt, I guess is the rest of it. And thinking of how many other jobs there are, how many professions that are generational. That could be, that could be said of anyone entering that family job. Anyway, it really, as you can see, it stayed with me.
Yeah, and I think even in your response, in terms of what is staying with you, you just said a bunch of really complicated things, because there's just such richness in this book. There is that notion of work, of labor, actually, that being dignified, but also just being something that not only is running through generations, that you are distinguished because you were born into and apprenticed into, and your family does a certain kind of work, that work being threatened, but also that work holding very, very significant personal high stakes in terms of how dangerous it is. I think also just that you said promise, just that, the quote was, I promised her, but just that notion of kind of what we promise each other, and kind of, what each generation represents in terms of promise, and how we are going to pay that forward. That's really big in this book, and kind of the space that we occupy as a family. I think there's a lot in this book that feels really tribal around family, just the space that we occupy within the community, within our tribe, and what the expectations are. I think all of those are really, really come through in this book. And just, there's such a huge conversation around that. But then the other thing that I feel like your comment really speaks towards is just the visceral, there's something so sensual and alive around the setting, and the way that people kind of are actually on the earth and part of the natural world, that itself feels threatened. It feels, it makes sense that this is a different sort of generational understanding of the relationship to the earth that I would say is not my relationship and is not my understanding. The way these folks are living close to the earth, and deeply, deeply affected by it and tethered to it is something that that comes through in this book in a way that's really resonant. And also, like I said, the sensuality of this book, when you go through this, like I felt like completely a part of this world. And it's such a detailed and lush experience, and often harrowing and frightening and visceral, and all of the levels that are are beautiful and gorgeous, and also, very explicit, and in their proximity, I would say, to death, or that's that notion of risk and danger is palpable throughout the book. So yeah, all of those things, the traffic of all of those thoughts really manifested in this book. Anyone else? I thought that there was one other person maybe who looked at this book. Was it Mary? I don't really want to call it.
Well, I can say that I read the book, and I feel as though one of the themes that interested me was the human capacity for denial, and how when your worldview is threatened, your way of life is threatened, how easy it is to get into that denial mode. You don't want to know the facts. You don't want to see the poisons that are in the environment. And I think that's been a huge issue and problem for all of us, not wanting to see the inconvenient truth, as it were.
Mhm.
That means our life has to change.
Yep, absolutely. It's a little scary how closely held some of those beliefs and perspectives are in this book, and the consequences seem really dire, right?
Yes.
So for me, if there's not any other kind of moments of heat or threads that you all kind of want to draw attention to, I have a long list. I have so many things to say, so definitely interrupt me at any point, or just feel free to unmute yourself and hop in. But there were a couple of things that really struck me, and I guess maybe one of them that feels really basic and universal is desire. I think desire plays a huge role in this book. Desire for agency, desire for human connection. And I think desire for, there's also, I guess, the other side of desire in this book. The other side of that coin feels like loss. So that inability to kind of hold on to just so many things, and the losses accumulate. Like as we move through the book, there is this like accretion of the things that we cannot hold, the things we cannot control, the things that we cannot maintain. And that feels, I would say, a tension that expands as we move through the book in a lovely, but also sort of devastating way. So those are things that I think a lot about. And also, I think that this is connected to desire, but I feel like there's a sense of dream that people have. They have ambitions. There is a sense of deep rootedness of this community, not only kind of in their opinions and positions and their kind of generational relationship with each other, and their roles within their families. And the trees, obviously, there's this kind of, connection that's an ongoing connection. But I think that there is, an equal and opposite impulse to change one's circumstances and to make better and to dream and to move beyond what actually has sort of been allocated as your portion in this community and in this life, that I think is really compelling and feels really familiar to me in these characters. And then I also wanted to think a little bit with you all around the structure of the book. And I don't know, Bonnie, if you maybe wanted to kind of toss out sort of some notes on how this story gets told, because I think that Ash made some really interesting choices on how the story builds and how it's kind of segmented in all the perspectives that we hear from. And I wondered if anyone wanted to just kind of introduce, for the others who haven't had a chance to get into it, what that kind of the structure of the book looks like.
Well, she alternates between different characters' points of view. And the characters mostly are the husband, the wife, and the son in this family, where the husband is the multi-generational logger. And her perspective has a lot to do with the fact that she's miscarried 8 times, just has the one son. And her sister, bless her heart, has 6 children, never had a problem. And for her, this is a major issue. And a major way she goes through her day is grieving and mourning and trying to figure out a way to have more children. And it's heartbreaking, really.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is Colleen, and we do have the sense of that heaviness, and we have the hauntedness around Colleen, and I don't want to call it envy, but she does, that it's difficult with her sister, that her sister
Mhm.
should be so lucky, considering the circumstances. And then what her husband is Rich, and Rich is also a person who, coming out of this intergenerational kind of work, sees a way to make his lot better and to improve things. And so he wagers essentially the family livelihood and all the savings on a possibility, that he can change things for the family. So that's a tension between the husband and wife. And then the kid Chubb, the other perspective, it comes through, one and only Chubb. And Chubb is interesting in the way that vantage is portrayed, because it is innocent, but it's so deeply kind of knowing in that way that feels really accurate. Like little kids are a little bit there. My friend says that they're close to the collective, and so they just have this sensibility. Like they just, you're not really getting anything past them, and there's something very sophisticated in their clarity. And so Chubb definitely has that. Like he comes through, and he's very, very clear and very balanced in the way. He's not someone, for example, who is operating out of denial or fear. He's not haunted. He's just very kind of awake to the world and very alert to what's going on around him, in so much as he can be. So he's kind of, I would say he's almost like a tonic. Is that right? Maybe like a sorbet. He's got something that comes, like everyone else has so much history and feeling and emotion and thoughts that are sort of, they're in the process of processing. But Chubb just rolls up on the scene, and he's just really clear, and he tells you what's happening. All of his chapters are for the most part really short, and they do a really different kind of work. So as you move through the novel, it's really like you have these kind of longer introductions that do come together. They're not, I don't want to say that they're a seamless kind of weaving, but it is sort of like a patchwork, I'd say, where you see all of these perspectives, and you get a sense as you move through of all of the characters and what their desires are, and where they're coming from, even though they are in and of themselves, accurately conflicted and full of contradiction and still struggling. But then as the novel moves forward, there's really a quickening of those like flashes, and as we cut from character to character, that aligns with the central tensions of the narrative. And I think it does this really beautiful job of speeding up, and it does feel like there is a sense of perilousness in recognizing kind of that if everybody rushes towards the direction they're heading and succeeds, then it's going to be, I feel like, catastrophic. Like you just get the sense of the rush towards the end. So it does become, I think in the beginning of the book, I had the strong sense that I didn't feel like I needed to read quickly at all. I was like, I'm just going to luxuriate. I'm going to hang out with all these people and get to know them. But then I do think that at a certain point, you have that notion that character is plot. And then there's a certain point where we've heard all of these voices singing to us so much that they're in our heads all, like Faulknerian, like all of these voices are in our heads. And then we just get to this kind of fever pitch where the action does really take over and sort of carry us through. Yeah. So it's exquisite, the architecture of this book and the way that it kind of just pulls us along. We're always with it, but we're not being dragged behind, but we're really kind of under the spell of the work as we move through. So for those of you who haven't read it, I do hope you give yourself the chance to read it. And it's sort of, I feel like there's something about it that it's really captivating. And it is really, I think it was Bonnie, you that said that it was heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking, but it is also the kind of book where you fall in love with these characters who are so flawed and who are working so hard and doing everything they can with whatever agency they have. So they're lovable and really familiar. They're pretty beautifully drawn. Were there any other moments for you all who read the book that that either lingered with you or that kind of posed questions? And I ask this mostly because, you know, we are going to get to talk with Ash a little bit. Maybe she answers some of these questions, but were there things that felt unresolved or mysterious to you in the book?
Well, of course, there are things that are unresolved, like will Colleen's current pregnancy work out or not? You know, obviously you're hoping for the best, but fearing for the worst. And I don't want to have spoilers for anyone, but the theme of betrayal is I think very interestingly handled in the book, because there are more than one betrayal, and how marriage survives that. It was just very, very interestingly done, I thought, very well done. So that was a thought that I had that I just kind of threw in there.
Mm-hmm. You're right about the betrayal. Also really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm unclear, but it might be my own fault. I'm unclear about Colleen's outcome. She's so happy. She's so very happy. And I'm just not clear about anything, really. Anything, actually, now I think about it, anything at all.
Do you well, does anyone else share that kind of the question mark there about anything at all? Because
without giving away the ending, where she is right, well, she's very happy right now. Going forward, where is she? And I have no idea.
mm-hmm.
I don't mean physically. I mean, I probably mean financially.
I think there are so many, there are things that are unresolved in the book, but I feel like the book is doing a good job of inviting us into that space of not knowing, and also sort of asks us, I think we have to necessarily interrogate multiple possibilities, you know, like it's asking us to think beyond ourselves and beyond what we know into these possibilities, because I mean, it feels to me like that's on purpose.
Trust her, to trust Colleen. She's very happy. Very, very, very happy. So I will trust Colleen.
I would put my money on Colleen too, definitely. Definitely. I wanted to, Linda, how are we doing on time?
I believe that Ash is in the waiting room, so she's. If you want, Nicole, I can. We can have Nikki bring her in, and you can begin your questions of her. I'll just kind of welcome her.
Sure, I'm happy to do that, and then I just also wanted to. There's so many, like, I feel like Ash is so brilliant at putting together these perfect sentences, and there's so much music in this book. And so I wanted to just, it's hard to even find a single thing to read, but I did want to just give you just a quick little sense for those of you who haven't yet read it, and even some of you who have, just again, just like this beautiful kind of construction of these sentences, and again, like the music. So Linda, would I be able to read just a quick paragraph?
Real quick, because I don't want to keep her in there too long. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just going to read this Helen Yancey quote. Good morning, my name is Helen Yancey. The microphone squealed and Luke's mom tilted her head back until it quieted. My husband, Carl, drove a spray truck for Sanderson for 14 years until they fired him. We had a baby in November, Eamon Paul. I was in labor 11 hours with him, and when he came out, the top of his skull was missing. All these people here, they know. They came to see like he was a circus animal. He came too. She pointed to Mr. Sanderson in his bright yellow shirt. He bought us this. He brought us this, rather. So again, just like that sense of like the gravity that's happening and also the good music in every line. Just wanted to share that.
Wow. Well, we're gonna welcome Ash. I see her connecting right now. Ash, welcome. Welcome to Gramercy Book Club. I'm up here. What an extraordinary debut. You've evoked a world so complete. You've drawn each character and moment with precision and heart. And you possess this rare generosity of spirit that permeates such an elegant novel. So we're very thrilled to feature your book tonight. And our moderator, Nicole Terez Dutton, has led a wonderful, robust discussion. I'm not sure, you know, I'll introduce you. The two of you will be speaking. Nicole's not only a renowned poet, but the 14th editor of the esteemed Kenyon Review. Everyone is now muted, so you and Nicole can begin your conversation. So I'll kind of silence myself.
Hi, Ash, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am well. I'm good. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really delighted that you could join us. And you know, I'm looking forward to talking with you about this work.
Thank you. I have many rejection letters from the Kenyon Review that I covet. So I'm very excited that you're here and that everyone else is. And it's so nice to do an event where you can actually see everyone's faces. That's lovely. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. I want to let you all know, I did not do that. That was before my time, all those rejection.
Oh no, they were well-deserved. They were well-deserved, and they were very kind, and there were always like little encouraging handwritten notes on them. I had them on a wall in my house for many, many years. They put some wind in my sails when I really needed it. So
totally wonderful. Okay, well, that's good. And I'm also, I'm thrilled to hear that you're from the moment of like handwritten rejection. That's
yeah, I'm showing my age, right?
a peak moment, yeah. So can you talk with us a little bit about the experience of writing this book and just corralling, because before you came into the Zoom room, I was just saying that this is a book that was so lush and it's just so rich and it's so layered and complex and beautiful. And I'm just curious how you possibly got all of these threads to come together to make such a glorious kind of telling.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was a very long process. It took me almost exactly 10 years from start to finish. And the current ending in the book is attempt number 6. And so 6 times a charm. And I started it I was living in Washington, D.C. I was working for a refugee resettlement agency and writing on the weekends. And I applied to graduate school at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and I applied to 11 MFA programs. I feel like people don't talk about rejection and failure enough. So I applied to 11, got into 2, and one of them happened to be the Iowa Writers Workshop. And so I went and I worked on this novel in secret for 4 years while I lived in Iowa. I had this little note on the inside of my apartment door that said, "Don't talk to anyone about your novel until you've finished it." And so, and I had a good job in Iowa City, and I thought, oh, you know, if I save up, I think in a few months I could finish this and I'd be ready to go. So like I chose a year on the calendar, like more than a year in advance, a date that I was going to quit my job, and I did. And I moved home to Flagstaff, Arizona, where my family was at that time and still is. And I lasted about 3 weeks before I was like, I'm going to go insane. I have to have a day job. And it took, you know, 6 more years after that. But I do think, and about 500,000 words that I have like moved over to a Word document because it causes me too much pain to think that I labored over them and now they're just dead. So I didn't kill them, I just moved them. And I do think that one of the benefits of doing it in a really inefficient way over many years is that I feel like I know my characters pretty well. And I know a lot of things about them that didn't end up making it onto the page in the book, you know, like I know how they spent Christmas, and, you know, I know what their birthdays were like, and I have all this sort of backstory about them, which I would hope that knowing that kind of backstory helps make them better rounded when you do see them on the page. Although maybe that's just I'm justifying it to myself.
They seem pretty round, Ash. They seem pretty round. But so are you saying that you wrote all of this information, and that's in the, not that the darlings have been killed, but they're elsewhere
Yeah.
file? Yeah.
Yeah, the elsewhere file, that's what I should call it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So a really long, and now while you were working on this, were you working on other things? And this is the project you return to, or you just focus on this?
I worked on this pretty faithfully, about 3 hours a day through all of those years. I wrote some short stories at the same time. I started a few sort of other novels, sort of at like, I don't know, they're not quite pits of despair, but sort of low points of like, you know, you work on a novel for so many years, and there is part of you as a rational human who thinks this might not work out. So maybe you shouldn't put all your eggs in this one basket. So I definitely had like moments of crisis or doubt where I went and worked on something wildly different.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get terribly far in those before I sort of realized like I had enough invested in this. I just kept coming back to it. But with the exception of some periods like that, I was like, I was a proud member of the 5 a.m. writing club. I was there before work almost every day.
Oh, wow. Joyce Carol Oates talks about that, being dog loyal to the work. And she talks about like the benefit of being hard-headed, you know, and I've heard a lot of people talk about the things that call you back, you know, you're writing about the things that you're actually really concerned. You can't fake that stuff. If they call you back, then, you know, through 10 years of work, then there's something in there for you. So that is a huge investment. Can I also just clarify, did you say that you worked on this in secret while you were in grad school, or you just in Iowa?
While I was in graduate school, I didn't mention it. I mentioned it to like maybe 2 or 3 very close friends, but I had like, you know, I had gone from not really knowing many writers, not being involved in a literary community, to Iowa. And I went from feeling like, oh, I have this thing I'm really pretty good at. And then you get to a program where there are 50 other people who are way better at this than you. And it was like, as a reader, it was absolutely delightful, you know, because I could go into the cubbies downstairs at Iowa and pull stories by Toni Mara and Emily Reskovich and Ayanna Mathis and Angela Flournoy, like writers I really admire that I first got to know like on computer printouts. So as a reader, it was a great gift. As a writer, it was like a very humbling and kind of doubt inspiring experience. And I'm very introverted and very thin-skinned, especially when I first got there, I was. And so I took everything very much to heart. And when the closest I can think to describe it is like you write the short story and you like love and nurture it, and it's like a puppy that you've created, and you set it on the workshop table, and 10 people armed with steak knives are like, okay, let's go. And it is in a spirit of like, there's like the writers I met at Iowa were so talented and so insightful, and I learned a huge amount from those workshops. And of everything I workshopped, 1 story survived, which is not a comment on the workshop process, it's a comment on the strength of the work. Like it just wasn't strong enough to withstand it. And like that was the cost of that learning. But I was very mindful of the fact that like if you want this thing to survive, you better protect it until you're sure you can put it out there and withstand and be strong enough emotionally and have enough faith in yourself and your work to be able to listen to the criticism and let it. I've always had this problem. I had a 2nd grade teacher who told me I needed to learn how to let things roll off my back like a duck in the rain. And I still I still am a very sensitive duck, I guess is how I should put it. But it did really help. And by the time I got ready to show it to someone, I was very sure, like, it didn't matter what someone said. I was like sure there was something in this that it would, like, it could withstand the scrutiny.
Okay, wow. And then I do have a question now, because it sounds like, even if you're a sensitive duck, it sounds like the talk is really good, Ash. And so I'm just curious, like, what kind of space you're in now that, the puppy is in the world, thriving, seems like. Congratulations, really, really beautifully reviewed. And how is that for you? Are you writing? Are you kind of giving yourself to this moment?
It all sort of feels like an elaborate practical joke, like a really wonderful one, but it doesn't seem quite real, I've just been I think I've been so blessed at every juncture, like when I think about how many things had to go right at so many moments on this path to get here, including, and I think probably a lot more crucially than I realized going in, like here in an independent bookstore, even via Zoom, and how much independent booksellers influence what books end up in readers' hands. And so I've just been very blessed in that regard. And I think that I'm about to go out on the road for a month and sign stock at stores up the West Coast. And I have a day job at a conservation organization that I love, and is also, like any nonprofit job, like fairly demanding. And so I'm sort of like, right now I'm in this state of complete and utter panic of all the work that I have to get done so I can leave on Friday. So I think one of the blessings for me of having a day job is, like, the people I work with, the cover of the New York Times book review, like, they're happy for me, but that doesn't mean a whole lot to them. Like, that press release still needs to go out tomorrow. And so, like, we're happy for you, now keep working. And I think that that's grounding, and I find this work very meaningful. And I do think that, like, it reminds me that there's writing and there's life, and and not to take any of it too seriously, because I've been very fortunate this time, but I think I've learned from the criticism, and that should apply to the praise too, that I shouldn't let someone else's view of my work govern its value for me, which is a kind of a hard one, at least for me personally.
Okay, that is hard to find that balance, I can imagine. But I don't want to run out of time, because there's a bunch of questions over here, Ash, and I see a question from Sabrina. The novel is told through the voices of 3 people until Enid's voice is heard toward the end of the book. What prompted you to introduce her voice at that point in the story?
That's a really good question. And it's a question that my editor also asked more than once. And I was very attached to it. I think partially because, although there's only one chapter in Enid's perspective in the book, I wrote many chapters in her first person voice, and that was the one that remained. And I think for me personally, the moment when Enid speaks is probably the worst moment of Colleen's life, one of the saddest moments of her life for sure. And I think I didn't want her to be alone in that moment. And I think you go through most of the book, or at least I did in writing it, thinking of Enid from Colleen's perspective. And Enid relies on Colleen in many ways. I think sometimes it felt to me like she was perhaps taking advantage of Colleen in some ways, or Colleen was being a little bit of a martyr and she should have maybe, but like, I think older sisters have that sort of mama bear tendency toward their younger sisters. Colleen certainly does. But actually, I think one of the most astute observations I've heard about that chapter, which didn't occur to me in such terms, but I think really is true, is that you have a book that's told in 3 perspectives, 3 voices that hopefully, if I've done my job, you're invested in. And then you lose one. And so there's this hole in the book. And so Enid comes in to fill it. Rich is gone. And so Enid takes on that third voice. And I think I don't have a great mind for structure, which is why it took me 10 years to figure out how to write a book. But I do think that does function that way. And once someone pointed it out to me, I was like, oh yeah, I think that is how that's working.
Thanks for that, Ash. Let's see. Oh, Linda Cass says, speaking of Joyce Carol Oates, she's often said she needs to see the end point at the beginnings. Ash has said that it was her sixth. Was it a challenge to write this epic story without seeing the end point?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. So I started out, I never start a project until I have the last scene. And so I started this book with a very specific ending in mind, which is not the ending in the book now. And Nan Graham, the publisher of Scribner, and my editor, Kathy Belden, of all the editors I met with when the book was going to auction, were the only set who said that they thought that the ending was wrong for the book. And that really terrified me, but I also thought that they were the right team for the book, so I chose them anyway. And then I think I kind of naively hoped, like, oh, maybe they'll forget that they don't think that's the right ending. And I worked on all these edits for a year, and then it came back like, oh, remember, that ending isn't right. And so I tried writing another one and it didn't work. And I tried another one and it didn't work. And my editor, and I was like becoming increasingly panicked as this process goes on. And my editor, Kathy Belden, said something to me that she said, I forget exactly how she put it, but she basically said that, like, you'll know it's the right ending because when you get to the end, we need to spend a little time with and see every character, and that character needs to sparkle. Like, you need to see the essence of that character in the ending. And I thought, I understand what you mean, like, instinctively, and I also have no idea how to do that. And so, and I finally, and I think what it really came down to is I love these characters. I spent 10 years with them. I don't want any harm to come to them. And so it was really hard to see this ending. And when I finally got it, it was like everything had been blurry, and then you just click the lens one notch to the right, and all of a sudden everything just snapped into this crisp focus. And I think the reason I knew it was the right ending was that I didn't have to change anything else in the book. Like, I didn't have to tug any narrative threads. I didn't have to add any foreshadowing. I changed nothing outside of the last 40 pages. And so I think that was liberating in a way, because it taught me that actually you don't have to know your ending when you start. You can find it even toward the end. And it was also like, when you work on something that long, it was also a really good reminder to me not to be, like, I'm a very careful person in my daily life, you know, like my mom's a school teacher, I don't speed, I'm very, like, I count my pennies. I'm still that person who, like, when I get to the register and the person's like, it'll be $13.67, I'm like, yeah, I know, because I've been counting how much this is going to be before I get here. But it taught me, so I don't take risks in my normal life, but it taught me that creatively, it's okay to, like, take a big chance and just jump and see where it goes. And it's okay not to know. And I think the not knowing, because I'm a beginner, probably, the not knowing was really frightening. But it did, I do think it's the right ending, even though, like, I can't think about it too much. Like, I can't think about Rich ending up there, and I can't think about Colleen and Chubb without him. Like, it's too painful. I don't know if that answers your question. I need, like, a spray bottle embedded in my laptop so you can squirt me when I start to go on too long.
I think it absolutely does. And I love that it was freeing. And I love also that you were driving in a particular direction and then realized that someone else pointed out to you, like, yeah, that's not it. And that description of everything snapping into place in this kind of seamless way, that seems magical, you know, that would happen. Hard one, but magical. I love that. We need to see here. Bonnie McMurray asks or says, I have been thinking about a film adaptation of this book. Have you spoken to anyone you may be interested?
Ani, you must be psychic. How do you know this? I've had like this has been the strangest part of this whole process, you know, like I've written a book that in my mind is a slow burn. Like in the Book of the Month Club, it has those visual icons for people to understand what kind of book it is, and mine has a little snail next to it. And so, which I wear with pride. Like I would wear the snail badge with pride, but it's a very slow book. It's very character driven. It's set in in a different time period in a landscape that would be very difficult to like portray on screen, and a perfect like falling an old growth redwood. I don't know anything about film, but I know that would be expensive in CGI. And so this week I've had a number of meetings with film and TV producers, which is been kind of humiliating actually, because I've been writing a book for 10 years. I haven't watched any television or films. And so if you have ideas that you want to recommend, I'm open to them, because when they reference their shows, I have no idea what they're talking about, but I don't want to say I understand you've devoted your life to this creative work and you're very proud of it, and I have no idea. It's just not my world. I have no idea what it is. So I don't see it, but there are people who seem to think that they could perhaps put it on screen. So if you have any guidance in that regard, Bonnie, I welcome it.
And there was one more. Bonnie, do you have some recommendations? Oh, you're muted. Bonnie, you're muted.
Oh no, I won't get Bonnie's advice.
I think the physicality, lots of men doing things, which seems to be a big Hollywood thing, you know, like men up trees, men with machines. And then the other aspect of it, the family aspect of it, to soften it. So I just feel like I could almost think about casting it, you know? And the character's complexity makes it interesting, because they're not straightforward good guys, bad guys. It's very, you know, the characterizations are very complex. So that's why I think it would be a good film. That's all.
I wish I'd met you a week ago. You could have come with me. That would have helped.
I doubt it. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds like another adventure. That sounds totally wonderful. Let's see. I have one more. Oh, an observation from Linda. The novel is so layered, it builds its momentum. I wonder if Ash's writing process in reaching this rich and full world from first draft to the final elegant novel.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you. I think probably it comes from, part of it, I think it comes from time. And part of it, I think, comes from the book is set over a calendar year, and you have, I've forgotten how many, between 90 and 100 days, I think, that are covered in the book. But I wrote 365 of them. And many of those days, I wrote from one character's point of view, and then realized toward the end of the chapter, oh, that's not going to work, because I need this insight, which only Colleen would have, and this chapter is in Rich's perspective. So I had to go back, there's a scene when they go to Alcie's baptism. And that scene, I originally wrote, I can't actually even remember which one ended up in the book, but I wrote that one from all three characters' perspectives. And because I can't let go of anything, when I sent it to my agent, I had that scene in all three characters' perspectives. So you can imagine how taxing that was for a reader to read the same scene from three. But in my mind, that was really important, because you were getting different elements from different people. And both my agent and my editor were like, you have to choose. And so there were many times where the chapter that ended up in there, I could take someone else's point of view of that day and put it in that way. And so I do think that maybe that helped. And then I don't know if any of you are our writers, or if this will be a useful piece of advice, but it was for me. Like my agent told me at one point, when you have 3 voices like that, a good strategy is to read the book through, only reading one point of view characters at a time. So read all of Rich's chapters through, read all Colleen's chapters through, and read all of Chubb's chapters through. And at the time I got that advice, I was like, oh man, that's going to take forever. I don't want to do that. But I did it several times, and it really helped like tighten things up and realize like inconsistencies, and also like watch the narrative sort of arcs better. So I think the short answer to that is that I just took so long, and I did it in such an inefficient way that some of it is like just sedimentary. I think like it just accumulated over time.
It seems to me like you took the time it took, and it seems like a gift to us, certainly, that you did that. And it seems like it served the work. I mean, it's really beautiful. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions that you all, oh, let me see if am I missing some? Oh, there are some more questions. Oh, Beth has observed that she thinks it's so character driven that that this might work as a series instead of a film. So I'm understanding, right? A series. And then Sabrina has a question. If there is a movie made of your novel, are you interested in writing the screenplay?
Oh, that's so kind of you to ask, but I think that's kind of like, that would be tantamount to asking me like, am I interested in dancing Swan Lake, or am I interested in playing in the WNBA? You know, like if I wanted to do that, I should have started a long time ago, because learning how to write a novel took me 10 years. I can't imagine how long it would take to write a screenplay when it's not just like, at least a novel is just words on a page, right? Like, but I feel like screenwriters have so much more to think about and to like orchestrate. I have nothing but admiration for people who are able to do it, but I think I would be disastrous at it.
You would feel okay about handing the work and entrusting someone? Would you want to choose that person?
I feel like, I mean, this might be naive. I feel like perhaps maybe I should ask you, Nicole, like I should ask someone who's written more than one book and has a sense of, although I guess it's harder for poets to see their work come to the screen, although there certainly seem like there's enough in poems that they're like you could, but I like, so maybe it's just being naive on my part, but I feel like it's a totally separate thing from my book. Like it's someone else's art form, it's someone else's project. They take it and then they do what they are good at and they make it into something else. I don't think of it any differently than like someone turning a book into a painting or a dance or something like that. It's just such a different medium. I don't think it would feel like mine anymore.
Okay. Linda, how are we doing with time?
If there are no more questions, I can close things up, or, you know, if you or Ash want to say anything further, it's really up to you.
I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions from you all? While we have Ash here. I just want to say thank you, Ash. I loved it, and I enjoyed being in the world of the book and under the spell of it. So I congratulate you. I'm delighted that it's getting so, you know, it's being so well received. I look forward to the movie or the series, you know, all of these things. And it was really nice to talk with you. Thanks for making time.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's an honor to meet you, and thank you all for reading. And Linda, I'm sorry, I'm a chronic Zoom interrupter.
Oh, no. I was just going to echo what Nicole said, which is that, you know, thank you so much for what you've given us. But also this, Nicole, you too, this was an illuminating conversation and earlier discussion about a very powerful novel. So just many thanks. Our gratitude also to our streaming engineer, Nikki Snyder, tonight, and to all of you participating and asking such wonderful questions. So this is, I guess, my way of doing a quick close. Closings are always hard, but it was great having you here, Ash, and having Nicole as our moderator and this kind of intimate discussion. And if you take a final look at the chat box, you're going to find our links to the September author programs, as well as a link to purchase Damnation Spring if you haven't already, or if you'd like to purchase a copy for a friend. It would be a wonderful gift. And just to say, Gramercy Books continues to be open 7 days a week, 10 to 6, and curbside pickup, and we're there for you. We're just thrilled that you spent an evening with us tonight, and hope to see you next time. Ash, again, thank you so much. Nicole, thank you so much.